Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today, From Print to Digital, the next generation of the circular. My name is Ben Flakis, and it's my pleasure to host and moderate today's discussion. We have a great lineup of speakers, and I think we're going to have a great and lively conversation. I am going to quickly introduce our speakers today. I will set the stage for today's discussion with a little overview of the challenge that we're looking to address. And we'll spend about 45 minutes in conversation and hopefully leave some time at the end for Q&A. So get those questions ready. All right. Our first speaker today, Devin Whiteway, Global Client Solutions at Facebook. Devin is a seasoned digital media marketer with more than 10 years of experience spanning roles on the client side, agency side, and most currently on the platform side at Facebook. Devin helps national grocery clients evolve their digital strategies and drive meaningful business outcomes across Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Messenger. Devin graduated from Dickinson College with a degree in international business and lives in Chicago, her hometown.
Thanks, Ben. Excited to be here.
Our next panelist is Kyle Cook. Kyle is the Senior Vice President of Digital and Emerging Media at Universal Media Analytics, a media buying platform agency in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. With an extensive roster of clients in the regional grocery space, Kyle develops strategies for paid media to help partners with the migration from traditional media to digital and emerging media. Additionally, his sweet spot is understanding how loyalty data can best be leveraged not only for retention, but driving acquisition. Throughout all media placements and strategy, Kyle's team develops best-in-class attribution methods ranging from identifying incremental foot traffic to measuring media impact on sales. Kyle, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, our next panelist, Tom Kuipers, is the Senior Vice President of Marketing and Advertising for Ollie's, one of the largest retailers of closeout merchandise in the US. Tom has spent over 25 years in retail marketing, building traditional CRM, loyalty, and digital marketing programs at Samsonite, Joann Stores, Bed Bath & Beyond, and now leading a digital marketing transformation at Ollie's. If you're not familiar with Ollie's, Ollie's is one of the country's most profitable and fastest growing retailers with 394 stores in 26 states. Tom, thank you for joining us today.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Next up is Adam Halim. Adam is the Senior Vice President of Business Development at Flip, a leading retail technology company, company that is reinventing the digital shopping experience. In his role, Adam leads Flip's sales efforts across North America, where he works to help the largest retail CPG and agency organizations navigate the fast-changing digital shopping landscape. Adam, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
Our next speaker is Connor Ryan. Connor is the CIO and co-founder of Stitcher Ads. Stitcher Ads is a Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and Snapchat partner, helping retailers and agencies scale full funnel O2O marketing campaigns. Connor leads the charge on effectively executing omni-channel media campaigns for brands including Finish Line, Saks Fifth Avenue, Joann Fabric, and craft stores. Connor, thank you for being here.
Great to be here, man.
And I have the honor to be your moderator today. My name is Ben Flakis. I have spent about 10 years working in the retail vertical on the agency side and across the ad tech space. This is a topic that is particularly near and dear to my heart. I worked on a team that developed the first video circular programs about 5 or 6 years ago. And I've seen firsthand how effective this content can be in driving omni-channel outcomes for retailers. I've had the privilege of working with dozens of retailers from big national brands like Lowe's and CVS and Staples down to regional grocers. And in my current consulting role, I'm advising companies like Sunday Sky and Undertone on dynamic video and high impact circular solutions. So before we get into our discussion, wanted to talk a little bit about the landscape right right now. We understand that retailers have decades of data that tells them that circular drives outcomes that matter. It drives sales and drives store traffic. But there is a massive disruption happening in the consumption habits around print. So overall shifts in demographic consumption and readership, decline in total circulation, and trade area outages that make it harder than ever to get this content in front of consumers. At the same time, we know that this content is incredibly powerful and drives performance. This is data that comes to us from care of Adam at Flip. What we know is that when we put this price and item content and offers in front of consumers, it drives incremental performance. And as that price and item content becomes more compelling, more personalized, more relevant to the consumer, that incremental performance only increases. So the good news as we kind of look at the landscape here, most retailers have taken the first step. They've taken that print circular that is localized. They've taken that content. They work with partners like Flip who can take that content and digitize it, categorize it, host it, make it available through feeds. And what that really enables now for retailers is a truly cross-channel approach to the digital distribution of circular content through things like online video and connected TV with partners like Sunday Sky, across display, high impact and traditional display through Undertone, and across multiple social platforms, including Facebook and Instagram through Stitcher Ads. So that is the landscape, and I'm excited to have our panel talk about this transformation. So with that, let's shift back to our panel. And Adam, I want to start with you here. Broad question. We've seen this trend in the last 15 or 20 years of print decline, but we've also seen retailers slow to react. Are you starting to see an acceleration of digital adoption or this shift from traditional print to digital?
Like one word, yes, definitely seeing an acceleration. We've been working with retailers on this shift for the past decade. And like we've seen a wide range of reaction times, and often it's due to like retailers' strategic choice, which is obviously their choice, and their shoppers' affinity for digital. So a retailer who's focused on obviously a younger, more digitally savvy shopper, and they've made a strategic choice to invest in digital, they moved very fast. And so an example is there's one Fortune 20 retailer who moved from spending $350 million on print in 2011 to $30 million in 2019. And like, that's a huge reduction and a huge change in 8 years. And all of that was prior to COVID. However, others, rightly so, have chosen to take more time. But even those retailers were starting to move in 2019. And we do an annual survey on print versus digital consumption for shoppers. And in 2019, we actually achieved that tipping point where there was a small majority of shoppers were using digital as their primary decision-making tool. So digital coupons, digital weekly ad, digital research. And so the pistons of that engine were actually moving already at a respectable pace in 2019. And then COVID hit, and obviously, the engine blew up and it just started running at 1 million miles an hour. And so now a large majority of retailers have increased digital focus. And that same survey, when we did it in 2020, a significant majority of shoppers now say that they primarily use digital to make decisions prior to going to the store or online. Retailers want to move to digital. A big reason is we're living in an age of uncertainty. And so a lot of marketers have said, look, we need to react quickly. One day we're dealing with a global pandemic. The next day we're dealing with, the storm of a lifetime in Texas. And we need to be able to move our marketing and adjust it quickly. Now, instead of questions coming up around the business case behind digital, like I've noticed that's completely out of the picture now. There's no more questions around should we do this. Now the question we're facing is how do we recreate that magic of print? The ability to have locally relevant, curated product price brought together in a way that builds the brand. How do we do that in digital? So that's really the question we're seeing now.
Excellent. And Connor, we heard Adam mention COVID-19, the elephant in the room, obviously a big accelerator. But beyond that, why is this the right time for retailers to be thinking about making this big jump to digital?
Well, Ben, I think, there are many factors beyond COVID-19, but I think one of there are four key factors I'd like to talk about. One of them is heavily related to COVID-19, but not necessarily in the way you would expect, and not what Adam was talking about, but what COVID-19 has done in the it's kind of enforced a paradigm shift in the industry, in that it has rapidly accelerated the removal of friction internally within organizations that has historically, fed into why Adam has spent the last decade trying to work through this process. Because if you think about the internal organizations in the retailer, there are many, many workflows, many jobs, many bonuses attached to print and getting all of the assets together, the merchandising, the co-op, and everything that goes into that, and those workflows and work processes and everything else. And then COVID-19 came along and blew up a lot of that. So it's kind of artificially, if you like, removed a lot of the barriers to make this possible. So that's the first thing, is the removal of barriers from as we come out of COVID-19 has just made this possible, right? So that's one of the reasons it's the right time. Two, the manufacturer, the CPG, the brands, their appetite now, again, somewhat related to COVID-19, but also in relation to future things that are coming, like a cookieless world, their appetite now to further engage with the retailer to reach those consumers and to leverage the retailer's data on those consumers to be relevant is greater than ever. So they want more flexibility than they can get in print. In digital, it is limitless. And thankfully, there is a match between that and the next factor, which is the customer's expectations. I expect, and we talk about digital savvy customers and so on, we all expect people who are trying to sell to us to know what we want or what we need. And the level of personalization that you can achieve digitally is potentially achievable in print, but at what cost? Am I going to print an individual sheet for every single customer in every household that I'm targeting? So that customer expectation is, again, it's greater than ever now. And retailers really have that challenge to sit in the middle of, I have a customer who wants this highly personalized experience. I have manufacturers and brands, CPGs, that want to get to that customer. And I have the opportunity in the middle to do that and to leverage digital to be able to do it.
Fantastic. So we're talking about this lowering of barriers internally within retail organizations. Tom, you're at a big retail organization. Tell me, from your perspective, as you started to make this shift into digital, what kind of hurdles have you encountered technically, organizationally? What has that process felt like for you as a retailer?
Hey, look, I mean, at the end of the day, it's work, right? Connor said it. I think COVID kind of accelerated everybody's acceptance, but at the same time, you still have a lot of organizational muscle memory that's built up around print circulars. So from a technical point of view, from an organizational point of view, it really has taken a lot of time in terms of kind of talking through what we wanted to do, making sure that all the different functional teams were aligned, making sure they understood the vision of what was happening. But that muscle memory is tight. I mean, it's really difficult when you've got an entire organization on the Ollie side, 30 years of print circular development that happens 22 times a year. It's tough to kind of break into that and make sure that you can actually then come back with a product that's going to be representative of what you want for the customers. We also had some technical challenges, right? Because we've never been set up on the digital side of the fence. And, we happen to be a retailer that doesn't have e-commerce. We were fortunate to be open during the pandemic. So, we had business going on. We actually debated whether we should launch our digital circular during this time just because of all the disruption. But we moved ahead with it. And we were able to work with our technical team, and they were very, very good in terms of helping us figure out what was going on. And the Stitcher ad folks were very good in terms of kind of holding our hands along the way. And then the last piece really comes down to funding, right? Because you've got a big machine funding print or whatever your legacy programs are, and you've got to break some of those funds out without kind of breaking the business, so that you can fund what you want to do within digital. So, I mean, lots of different barriers, but at the same time, an acceptance, I think more an acceptance, like Connor said, because of COVID, but still, plenty of barriers to jump over there.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'm curious on a macro level, and you don't have to answer this if it's too secret sauce. I'm curious if retailers are starting to think about this as a transition of those print dollars or digital dollars, or if that's still a question mark for retailers. My assumption is that we're going to quickly get to a place where that print spend is starting to be decreased, and those print dollars just simply move to digital. Obviously, that creates internal political questions and a lot of stakeholders who have entrenched interests there. Is that something that you've run into at all, Tom, internally, or is that?
Look, I mean, at the end of the day, you do have to find the money, right? And Ben, you pointed it out at the beginning. Newspapers are declining in circulation year over year, so those funds are opening up just by default, not necessarily by design. And then you've also got to get into, should you relook at your media buys? Should you try to understand where you have penetration that's gone beyond where it should? Things, the things that you should be doing every day to really open up those dollars. And I think each one of us has to go through that discussion, and each one of us has a different marketing budget, marketing mix that we have to apply to. But the print side, unfortunately, in many ways, is opening up those funds on its own.
Interesting. So maybe just to follow up on this idea of the technical hurdles, Devin, I want to come to you. This is complex data. We're talking about hundreds of SKUs that change week to week, that have potentially operate across multiple pricing zones. This stuff has to be organized. Who owns this now? Who's making decisions about promo? Are digital marketing teams plugged into the right feed engineers? What does this ecosystem look like now that it's shifting into digital?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It is highly complex. And the short answer is it's complicated. This tends to vary pretty dramatically across retailers. Tom touched on this a little bit about how, those workflows and those relationships and that preference towards print is like so ingrained in many retailers, just overall processes. And a lot of times we see that historically these digital marketing teams have not been connected in any way to some of those data feeds or engineers that are managing the data or the promotions or the sales, or even sometimes even like the names of the product or the product descriptions within some of those feeds. And so it does get really complicated. And one of the first steps that we typically recommend when considering this shift or when acting on these types of shifts is really just getting a meeting of the mind scheduled. So getting everyone in one room, all of those engineering teams, your ad ops team who's managing a lot of your digital feeds, your media teams, everyone in one room to discuss what's available, what form that data is in, how regularly that data is updated, who's responsible for QAing and everything that goes into that. So you can start to identify those gaps and understand like what your ultimate, final product can look like. And the cool thing is that like at the end of the day, a digital circular can be something that's fully automated, that's dynamically updating week to week. It's got localized pricing, it's got personalized content. But to enable that, these feeds and those connections and those relationships really have to be rock solid.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I've encountered large organizations that are somewhat siloed, where they may not realize the digital team that you work with doesn't know that there's a team down the hall that's been working to digitize weekly ad content. So it's eye-opening to them when you can put them in touch with their colleagues within the same building and help them understand that this is possible. Adam, this is obviously an area that you work in. I do want to ask you a question to come back to that case study that I blatantly ripped off from you. But but also wanted to get your thoughts on this feed process, because again, it is highly complex, but this is an area that where you have expertise. Anything that you want to add to that process of digitizing these complex feeds, and maybe especially in the grocery space where often there are hundreds of pricing zones. What does it look like for your group to be handling this type of data?
Right, and I think Tom and Devin highlighted it. It can be a daunting exercise, and so the way we kind of like paint the picture is imagine a cliff with an ocean in the middle, and you have this really rickety bridge, and you're on one solid ground, and you need to get to the next solid ground, but you're gonna have to go across a pretty uncomfortable bridge, and it is a little bit scary. But once you get to the other side, you realize, oh wow, that wasn't that bad, and you'll go do it again. Well, maybe you won't do it again, but it is a little bit easier. So at Flip, what we've tried to do is kind of solidify that rickety bridge. And so I know a good example with Stitcher Ads and even Facebook with a number of large retailers. We're able to take the existing content that the retailer has at the local level, and it could start in a PDF format, and turn it into a usable feed, and then work with the retailer to then back up and get their full digital infrastructure in place. So the idea is like, you don't have to wait that long. We can start moving with the assets that you have. And so that's a great place to start.
I love that, Adam. If I can just quickly jump in to support that, we have seen on our side as well that exact process take place. And it's in many ways like an educational opportunity too, where when you have all these disparate groups, sometimes it's just helpful to have someone like a third party come in and show you the ropes, lead the charge. They know who needs to be identified for which things, and that can really be an asset to helping the transformation as everyone kind of gets their sea legs on that rickety bridge.
The rickety bridge, I like it. So I want to come back to that case study, because there is real data that shows that this content has impact, right? There's nothing magical about the print, the paper itself. It's the content, it's this pricing item that really moves the needle. What is it about this content, Adam, that makes it so valuable?
It's funny, we call it the magic of print, but I think there was a good study, I think it was by McKinsey, that showed that 47% of all ad effectiveness in digital is just the creative. So I think shoppers actually get value out of that weekly ad. It's one of the few things like a Super Bowl ad. Like, people will actively seek it out. And you think about it, it's a little counterintuitive for an ad, because usually you're trying to cram an ad in a shopper's face. And in this instance, they're looking for it. And it's because it has a curated assortment of product and price. And maybe this is part of the print legacy, right? Print forced you to say, hey, I can't show everything. I'm going to have to pick the best stuff. And so I think in digital, what we've seen is top and bottom of funnel. You see it right from the clicks, the impression state kind of information that you showed earlier, right down. We've done full closed loop, using LiveRamp. We've done this with Deloitte. You see that when you expose shoppers to a curated assortments of your product and price before they go to your site or store, just the exposure to it, they spend about 30% more. And so there is something really special about that weekly ad. And I wish I could tell you more, but we're still researching it. We actually have a full team that is focused on kind of answering that, like, what is the human kind of connection to this idea of retailers pulling together some merchandise for them, and why that kind of drives action.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, my experience, as I mentioned, I've seen this firsthand. It's that ability to bring this content to consumers, then obviously all the things that we can start to do in the digital space, but really whatever the metric is that we're trying to, whatever the outcome that we're trying to drive is, if it's foot traffic or omnichannel sales lift, e-commerce, in-store, return on ad spend, and even channels like video, which are not traditionally considered sort of drivers of those types of outcomes, by creating things like Video Circle, we've seen that happen. So there's great power in that content. Kyle, I want to come to you and talk about grocery specifically, since you work with a lot of regional grocers. These are, some of the most sort of traditional marketers. The circular is so central to their marketing efforts. How are grocers specifically starting to adapt to this shift?
Absolutely. And, I think everybody, I got the benefit of kind of speaking last year, listening to everyone, because everyone touched on a little bit of it, regardless of industry, regardless of what vertical we're talking, mainly retail here, obviously. But grocer, they know they need to shift. And I know we're talking digital here, and I'm not going to use the term eliminate, right? There knows that there needs to be that shift and that migration. But it's so ingrained into their media mix, and it's so ingrained into the consumer, the conditioning of the consumer, right? I think Tom talked about it, how long it's been around, and essentially removing pieces from a grocery retailer. It's the fear of the unknown. And when you remove pieces, it equates that with sales. So if you're removing pieces, you're removing sales. And at the end of the day, I think a lot of experiences that we've had and what we've really run into is, I think, again, everybody and everyone listening here is that mindset of anecdotal versus analytical. At the end of the day, there really needs to be that analytical mindset, even if we're still dealing with print. And again, Tom, jumped and touched on it regarding, over penetration to find dollars, right? Even if it's, analytical to the spends, we also, talk about sales, pulling in there. And one of the things that, everybody's used here is the term acceleration, both from COVID, but, acceleration, especially in the regional grocery space, some partners are accelerated into this ad technology because those barriers are decreasing, because there is a need. But also one thing that I don't think was touched on, and Adam touched on it a little bit earlier, talking about a $350 million print budget from a Fortune 20. Regional grocers have to compete with those Fortune 20s. They have to compete with the Amazons, the Walmarts, the Targets, who continue to make that play more into the grocery foray. So these brands are really accelerating, saying, "Hey, we really need to start, looking and utilizing this more." Or not to be dire, but we might be out of business in a couple of years with these large behemoths coming in. So at the end of the day, really the best step for these grocers is formulating an attribution modeling. We all talked about it, closed loop attribution. Adam mentioned through LiveRamp, managing in-store sales, running simple holdout tests against audiences to see if there's a lift from a digital standpoint. And some brands that we work with, a specific brand, does a very, very good job at 3 or 4 different attribution models to test all of this. But it's really interesting. And the thing that if I point out the most, besides the fear of the unknown, is there has to be a commitment, not just from a resource standpoint, because if we look at, print and digital CPMs, they're obviously vastly different, but a time commitment. You can't just turn it on digital for a week and expect to see this great shift in migration. It needs to be that 3-4 month time. So not just resource, but time is a commitment that a lot of retailers, unfortunately, just have a little bit of a fear of.
Interesting. So talking about how to help these retailers psychologically prepare for this journey across the rickety bridge. We're going to keep coming back to this rickety bridge metaphor. Thank you, Adam, for that. Tom, again, from the retailer's perspective, as you've made this shift, what are the biggest benefits to starting to engage more in the digital space with this content?
Yeah, sure. I think first I'd point out, we haven't made the shift, we're making the shift, right? It's a journey. It takes a long time. We've started to do that, and I'm pretty pleased with the direction that we've gone in. But, a couple of key benefits that we found. Number one, we can target our digital ads to people that we know have not shopped in our stores. So we're using our data. We're able to kind of marry that and with with Facebook, Instagram, et cetera, target the right people, target prospects, people who look like our best consumers. So that ability to speak to them a little bit more confidently. I probably was doing that in newspaper, but I don't really know. I think number two, we can also go back and re-engage with our customers, right? So we can retarget, we can reinforce. So if we deliver a piece to their home, we can deliver the Facebook ads right around the same time. We can personalize them a little bit more. And then number three, I would say, and this is really something that we were able to use well, I think, over this last year, is that speed and flexibility that print doesn't really offer. The ability to kind of pivot and address a storm in Texas or be able to speak to the needs of consumers a little differently when COVID came on. That was really very helpful to have that tool, because we didn't have that in our toolbox other than email, which is really talking to our already existing customers. So those are kind of, I think, the key benefits I would point out as we make this journey.
Tom, if you can share some insight into the performance you've seen, because to come back to Kyle's point earlier about the need to have attribution here, have you started to see, I know it's a journey and I know you've just started, but are you seeing data that's informing you that this is a worthwhile endeavor, that digital can start to drive performance for you?
Yeah, so again, we're a little different than many retailers in that we don't have e-commerce, so that direct click and buy behavior we don't get to see, although we can drive to store locator, et cetera. We did a lot of testing. So the Stitcher folks worked with my team. We were able to put together, I think, 4 or 5 different tests this past year. And we did some with Facebook as well from a customer match perspective, where we had holdout groups. We did some holdouts of some of our other media types. So we ran flyers in some markets, flyers plus Stitcher in other markets, no flyers in some markets, and we went completely dark in other markets. So we were able to kind of tease out what that incremental value for Stitcher ads are versus flyers versus the combination. And that was really instrumental in kind of developing our strategy going forward. So yeah, we've seen the results. We're pleased with the results. We think the magic mix, for at least for Ollie's, is that combination of the two. And that's where we're seeing the biggest incremental lift.
Awesome. Kyle, I want to come to you with the same question, except from the grocery perspective, and maybe similar challenges, although I think obviously we've seen COVID-19 accelerate e-commerce adoption across grocery. Maybe starting with this broader question of the benefits that you've seen as you started to make this shift, and any anecdotes you can share around performance that you've seen.
Yeah, I think the benefits that we've seen obviously vary, by client and what stage they are. As Tom mentioned, they're in the middle of that shift. So some of the benefits that we have seen, we have a fantastic, print department, analytical department that really takes a look at, specific store sales against, by zip, what that circular distribution by zip is executing against, and runs those, regression analyses, diminishing returns. And what we've really found the most success in is that combination of digital and print, right? That's why we're not running away from print anytime soon. And I know we might talk about future later here, but that combination has seen the biggest lift. So, if there's a zip code that's, not contributing a lot to sales, but still is getting that print circular for whatever odd reason, that digital replacement, can be there for pennies on the cost and is still maintaining those sales. And we've seen, an acquisition mindset as well, even, combining with print and digital. So it's certainly when those two are together and done intelligently, not just done for the sake that you're doing it. That's where we've seen the best success. And on top of that, layering in specific data, as Tom mentioned, matching on Facebook, and that others have talked about, looking at certain consumer segments, working with the likes of Foursquare or Placed or Ninth Decimal, and building, custom audiences of mobile devices that go into certain, competitive locations, and delivering those segments, specific personalized ads that are much more call to action heavy. All of these things play into the role, but the big thing and underlying message there is, it works. We've seen the best lift in sales when print and digital work together.
That's fabulous. And
I have some stats. I've just pulled up some stats from a recent study we did with a large national grocer. So, I think we were looking for some numbers here to, get people inspired and motivated. And I'm just looking at the results here, 2.41% lift in revenue per household, 1.42% lift in orders per household, 8.5 or 8.5x ROAS, And just getting into the micro detail on it, the highest sales lift by age for the study was 4.67% lift in the 20 to 29-year-old bracket. And that was that was a campaign ran on Facebook and Instagram, fully immersive digital circular, with a Visa-powered lift study in the background to do all of that measurement to give us those lift studies. So, there is clear evidence that there is benefit, immediate benefit from, going across that bridge. The steps across that bridge are worth it. And what I will say about the bridge is, it's a two-way bridge. And to go back to what Tom was saying earlier on, it's not go across the bridge and the bridge is going to collapse behind you and print is forever left in the past. It is for me, it's about, from my business, from Cedar Rath's perspective, we're about getting across the bridge, but also about building pillars underneath that bridge to make it more stable so that you can achieve the correct media mix, because some customers want that print document in their hand, but there are many more who want that personalized digital experience on their phone in their hand as well. So it's about using all of the data we have available to us to deliver the right experience to the right customer at the right time with the right offers and so on. So.
The data is really interesting, and my takeaway from that immediately is this idea that the distribution challenge of print is not felt universally. That younger folks are obviously disproportionately less interested in print content. So the idea that you can reach young folks, millennials, with this content through digital channels who you cannot reach with print is fascinating. So thinking about digital not only as an overall sort of replacement for this total circulation decline, but thinking about using the scalpel to identify audiences, demographics that may not engage with print, or zip codes around your stores where print may not be available, to really shore up your sort of omnichannel circular distribution strategy is really interesting. And I want to stay with you, Connor, and to get at this idea that a shift to digital is not just about that sort of shoring up or replacing print, but it's an opportunity to really evolve the concept of circular in general. We have this moment where we can take advantage of what digital allows for. Data driven, we can be addressable to the consumer, we can be personalized. How should retailers be thinking about this opportunity? What are the best practices here that they should be mindful of?
Let's go back to a point Kyle made earlier on about the behemoths, the Amazons, the absolute elephant in the room. So why has Amazon become a behemoth? What is it that Amazon does differently or has done differently than the regional grocery store? Digital first, and absolutely obsessed with data and leveraging their data. That is why Amazon sells to the customer who lives across the street from that grocery, because Amazon had the luxury and the convenience of being digital first and much easier to use that data, and only primarily exists in the digital world for the Whole Foods, etc. So the data was rapidly available and easily measurable. Tom mentioned they don't have e-com, so it's not click, buy, it's working, I know it's working, easily done. So that's the key, is leverage the data across many fields. And one is, I think the point you were hinting at there, is at a personalization level. So I know you're Connor, I know you're an organic food only buyer, I know you're gluten-free, I know the other dietary restrictions in your household. So the experience that I'm going to deliver to you is going to be completely different to what I deliver to Ben, because Ben practically will eat anything. So it's leveraging the data to that level of personalization, where we get down to dietary level, and we have all the data. We know every product in every basket that you've ever bought in the store. You know who doesn't? Amazon. The grocers have that data, and right now Amazon's trying to break into this to get the data to be able to grow it. The retailers already have it. Is exploited quickly, so you can win that war, because you have the asset, yet you got convenience of Amazon that deliver next day. While grocery stores down the street, I can get it in 10 minutes or an hour. You know what I mean? They can beat them on convenience. You can beat them on all levels if they, take the steps onto the bridge and actually start to leverage the data. And, that's from a personalization perspective. But to go back to Tom's point, measurement, we talked about attribution a little bit, not so much about measurement. We have closed loop measurement now. We can do amazing things like identify that gluten-free buyer. We can personalize the circular to only gluten-free products, and not only gluten-free products, but we can sell that placement to the gluten-free CPG, right? Because that's what they want. Then we can actually track Connor's visit to the store. Connor's a loyalty customer in store, so when Connor purchases, we have some fingerprints, some physical fingerprints of Connor in the form of his name and his email address or his phone number in our loyalty scheme. We're able to leverage that data to match Connor up with a user on Facebook. User on Facebook has email address. In-store buyer has the same email address. It's the same person. And we're then able to close loop measurement on that. So even in the case where it's not an e-com transaction, click, buy, pixel fire data straight in, we have for all of our clients, we have a 24-hour cycle where we're taking all of those in-store transactions every day and pulling that in, and then being able to measure against the efficacy of those digital circular ads that we are running. So we have the closed loop to be able to measure, and then you're into the attribution models then of, well, you know, the first thing I say to somebody will talk attribution, they're thinking digital, they're thinking last click, I say goodbye. I said, why do you say goodbye? I said, I want to run ads all the time. You only want to run ads on Thursdays and Fridays. No, I don't want to be dark. I want to run all week. I want to hit people at the right time when they're in the, you know, the store planning. Yep. But last click means it's immediate. If they don't do it immediately, they're not interested. So I'm only going to run their ads on Thursdays and Fridays because I know most people go up to store, you know, one day last click on Fridays and Saturdays. So that's when it looks like it's working best. So it's about blowing up the traditional attribution thinking away from digital and coming up with an omni-channel attribution model that is at least 7 days in duration, so that you are allowing to hit somebody with a relevant product and allow them to plan their store visit and get to the store and actually purchase. That takes 7 days. So whatever, and maybe you only take 10% of that 7-day attribution model or whatever the metrics underlying that are, but fundamentally it has to be 7 days in duration if you are going to effectively measure the impact of digital on social and how it's actually impacting your in-store sales. So, you know, and it's all data. All of that is fueled by data.
And Connor, I appreciate your passion for attribution. It's definitely something that across the industry we have to solve for. We want to make sure that we fully understand, you know, what is moving the needle. But I want to kind of go back to the first part of that, or maybe the unifying theme there, which is data. And if we're going to talk about data, I have to go to Facebook here. So Devin, I'm going to come to you. You know, we're talking about data-driven personalization, data-driven measurement. How do loyalty programs fit in here? From a pure data standpoint, right? This feels crucial to start to organize this data in one place and leverage it intelligently.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Ben. When it comes to personalization or measurement or attribution, for retail specifically, loyalty programs are the bread and butter, like period, full stop. I cannot overemphasize how crucial these are to enabling anything digital for the future. You know, we just heard a lot from Connor around data and the importance of it, how it feeds into closed loop measurement, how it feeds into personalization. If you don't have your data as a retailer tied to a person, you can't enable personalization. You know, you might know, yes, I sold, you know, I don't know, 3 million units of whatever product. You might know that people buy a certain blend of products, but if you can't tie those back to the actual people making those purchases, ultimately that data is, sorry, I live by a firehouse. Ultimately that data is like not really as usable. So loyalty programs, I mean, absolutely key. You know, we think about retail in general, like 90% of stuff is happening in store. And so these point of sale purchases where you're sharing your loyalty or you're entering a phone number or something, that's really important. And I think when we think about which retailers are excelling here, if we sort of take off our marketer hats for a second and zoom out, we all kind of do this where there's this value exchange, and us as customers, you know, we know what things it makes sense to share our data with and where it doesn't. So I'll be totally candid. I still use my mom's phone number at the grocery store I mean, there's no reason for me really to update it because the value exchange for me is like coupons and discounts at point of sale. And frankly, my data is much more valuable to the grocer. But for me, I can enter almost any phone number and I can get that discount that is the valuable bit for me. But if I think about maybe like a pharmacy that I go to or, you know, a beauty retailer that I frequent, I would be more likely to have updated personal information there because it's important for me to get the text that reminds me like, hey, your prescription is due. Or, you know, I want to get the heads up that like, you know, maybe you're a sneakerhead and you're like, you want to get that text that says this shoe is dropping tomorrow at midnight because it's important for you to, as a consumer, to like know that from the brand. And so when we think about loyalty programs, like, yes, the data is important, but what is the value exchange that you're offering your customer and how can you give them something that's so valuable that it makes them want to share updated like data that they're using, you know, is that email address the same one they're using on their digital social platforms? What is that value exchange? And I think, not to go too long here, but I think sometimes we think it has to be monetary and it really doesn't. It could be a seamless app experience. You know, maybe it's something where like all of your data is already saved. You can check out in 2 clicks. And that's easy for a mom who's trying to run around and pick up the groceries like before what, you know, that can be enough value. So I think I just would really encourage everyone when we think about loyalty, like centering the customer on that, thinking about what they want and what's valuable to them that makes that relationship kind of sticky so that that data is shared back with those retailers. So it then can power your personalized media, your circulars, and, you know, ultimately all the testing to understand how things are working.
Awesome. We're sticking with this idea of loyalty data. Adam, I want to come to you. For a lot of retailers, the print circular went from cost center to profit driver. Where does that sit now as we shift to digital? Is this, is this the rise of the retailer media network? Is that the model going forward? Is it retailers leveraging this data to drive incremental investment from their brand CPG partners? What are your thoughts on the evolution there?
Yeah, so I mean, short answer is you can definitely turn this into a profit center. And in fact, digital gives you more opportunities to monetize than print. But again, like it's something that sometimes I can understand is difficult to get comfortable with. Prior to COVID, I'm thinking like this is the war. I feel like an old man. I feel like this is what we're going to be talking about. But prior to COVID, there was a fear of losing foot traffic if things shifted to digital. And then during COVID, it was like, oh, we need digital to drive foot traffic. So that kind of fear was put to bed from the merchandiser side. But then what kind of trickled up as we started moving more quickly is the merchandisers were afraid of losing trade leverage because the print circular was a great way to extract trade dollars from the vendors. However, we've proven that you can, that digital provides more opportunities to get trade over and beyond what you're getting in print. And it also gives you an opportunity to tap into a separate bucket. Large CPGs, they have a brand bucket that is separate from trade, and they won't invest it in the same areas they invest trade. But this brand bucket now becomes available for retailers. So my favorite story involves a giant retailer, one of the biggest in the world. And we spent 12 months, and maybe Tom, you'll find this, I don't know, maybe it's funny, maybe it's not, but working between the merchandising and the marketing team. And at some point, I felt like I was sitting between both my parents arguing. Maybe it was just like an isolated incident, but we were trying to align on how we were going to do digital vendor programs. And there was a huge fear, again, if we do this wrong, the vendors were going to start reducing investment. And obviously that's a nightmare for a merchandiser. However, 4 months into the initiative, we had a debrief. And I remember asking, so how are things going? And one of the merchandisers, sheepishly told me, well, to be honest, we're sitting on more money than we're used to dealing with. And now we're fighting over where that budget should go. So it was like a complete 180. They're still arguing, but it's really good. And the merchandising marketing tension, I'm sure, is very healthy for retail. But you can turn this into a profit driver. You can make money on it. And it's one simple fact. You can buy inventory theoretically from, Facebook, and resell it at a higher CPM because you're adding value by putting your retailer logo in your retailer pricing on the ad. And products and prices drive value, and high intent shoppers are attracted to retailers' ads. And so that's a great audience for a CPG. So there's definitely a way to turn this into a profit driver.
Yeah, that's a great point. We know that the value that retailers bring with their data is tremendous, and obviously their inventory as well. But we do hear from brands and CPGs that they love the data, they love the attribution and insight that they get, but they don't love the creative executions. They want to be doing more of this price and item, and it's hard. So a lot of the things that you start to solve for as you shift circular into digital, that ability to be dynamic and real-time and personalized with offer data, applies immediately as you shift into that vendor and co-op world or retailer media world. So that's fantastic. I know we're getting to time, and I do want to talk a little bit about the future. I want to come back to Kyle and Tom on this and just understand. I think I heard you both say very clearly that the shift to digital is about supplementing print. It is not a replacement. So help me understand, maybe Tom, I'll come to you first, the future of print circular. It's not going away. The obituary is premature. What does it look like as we head forward?
Yeah, I think that one probably deserves a couple beers over the conversation. But, it's funny. I remember, I'm probably the oldest person on this panel. I remember back in the day when they said email was dead. Print circular is going to be around for a while, although newspapers are not helping the case for themselves, and that's continuing the decline. I think the reality is exactly what the team here has been saying. We're following the data, and right now the data is telling us that combo is really the 1-2 punch that we need. But at the same time, we're not taking it for granted, and we're continuing to test and learn and look at that data and understand, are there segments where we're not seeing that same type of harmony between the two channels? You pointed out a couple, right? We tend to have an older customer in our stores. However, we need to attract younger customers, and this digital world is probably one that I'll lean into to do that. Whereas the print side, not so much. So we're constantly kind of fiddling with that marketing mix to make sure that we're talking to the right people. And as Connor said, also thinking about, where we can personalize. We've got stores with specific assortments. We can talk to those people who may be interested in those assortments. We have ways of personalizing that we really haven't maximized yet in terms of what we're doing. So it's a learning exercise as we go. I don't think anybody here would pretend to have the answer to that question. But again, we're going to follow the data. We're going to test and learn into it. And it's a journey. It really is.
Kyle, I'm going to come back to you on this same question of the future of print. Where does it sit in this new world?
Yeah, well, I'll take a stab at maybe guessing where it is, and who knows, right? But it's definitely at this inflection point. I think we're going to see it dramatically reduced if it's still around, right? And reduced down to single sheet, front, back, that may be it. I mean, you look at, specifically grocery stores, their retail footprints are getting smaller, not bigger, right? You look at the Trader Joe's and the Aldi's and the Lidl's coming in the space and really, decreasing that size of the store footprint, going to decrease the size of the products, within that. It's going to decrease that size of the circular, but it's still absolutely a viable piece in that consumer journey, which Adam talked about, mentioned from that, top of funnel, bottom funnel. So really excited to see what happens, but I think, living that in a retention type piece. And the one thing just want to touch on, before we end is, Tom mentioned, an older shopper at Ollie's. Grocery stores, if you're looking at those consumers, their, flag bearer average demographic being in the 50s, that uses print primarily, there's still a lot of years left from a print standpoint. Now, obviously that shift has to happen over to digital to get younger. You see it with traditional TV moving into streaming audio, right? It's the same thing regardless of industry or vertical or media type that we're talking about. So we're at that inflection point where things need to continue to certainly happen, but that baseline of print, that certainly still needs to be there from a retention standpoint.
And I know we're just about at time, and I apologize. This was such a great conversation that we sort of blew through the Q&A period. So if I understand correctly, we can follow up, and if folks have questions, we absolutely encourage them to reach out, and we are happy to get back and share some answers. But I do want to come back to kind of a parting thought here. I'm going to make this a little bit of a two-parter. I want to understand from your perspective the future of circular, the future of digital circular as we head into the next 5 years. And I'm going to give you a chance to feel free to answer that question, but any other sort of final thoughts, parting wisdom, and thoughts about sort of what the future holds in this digital personalized world. So why don't we go around? Anybody who wants to jump in can chime in. Or I'll just go on you. Connor.
I come in. I just think it's unlimited opportunity. Just to de-risk the Amazon threat, the Amazon type threat, but also just to engage with the brands, the manufacturers, CPGs in a whole new way and give them what they want, and end up with that same problem that retailer Adam mentioned, where your problem very quickly will become you have too many dollars, you don't know where to put them, as opposed to operating in a world where you're kind of frightened to doing anything to risk losing dollars.
Awesome.
I can jump in next. I think when we think about the future, the word that comes to mind really is flexibility. So just being able to really tailor something that feels really authentic for your brand and for your consumers, and is providing value both ways. I think that's ultimately like where digital circular is going, and that will look really different for each retailer. And that's kind of my parting wisdom, I guess, as well. Like, we're all talking about this shift that's a general shift to digital, but at the end of the day, like, every brand knows their own customers best. There is a right time and a right way to do this for each brand. And so as long as you're centering those business decisions on the customer and their needs and their preferences, like, I really think you can't go wrong.
Yeah, you know what, Devin, that was like very well said. I think it's we got to follow the shopper, and the only additional thing I would add is this idea of like VUCA, the U.S. Army's acronym for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And one retailer executive told me these once in a lifetime events are starting to happen multiple times a year. And so I think that's another thing that's kind of sitting and underlying this whole digital anxiety we have. And we're like, okay, we got to be flexible and agile. And it goes from supply chain to marketing to store operations to e-com. Like that's obviously a big picture thing, but VUCA is what I'm constantly thinking of it. How do we stay agile?
Yeah, I'll piggyback off that. That was, certainly something I was going to say from an agility standpoint. But our CEO always talks about retailers have two things: their people and their data, right? And if looking forward, certainly can be done right now, but that acceleration to leveraging your data from a personalized standpoint, especially in the grocery space, definitely in the next couple of years, absolutely has to be there.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll just echo pretty much what everyone just said, and kind of reiterate, it is a journey. It taking that first step on that rickety bridge really is something that takes a little bit of vision from the marketing side to push through the organization. Speaking it from the retail perspective, it is scary but exciting at the same time, and I think that the benefits will present themselves as you go, following the data and really understanding what your customer wants. So.
That's great. I love it. Test soon, get started, don't wait, and test, learn, and go from there. This has been great. I want to thank our panel, Devin Whiteway, Global Client Solutions at Facebook. Thank you for joining us. Kyle Cook, Digital and Emerging Media at Universal Media and Analytics. Tom Kuipers, Senior Vice President Marketing at Ollie's. Adam Halim, Senior Vice President, Business Development at Flip. And Connor Ryan, CIO and co-founder at Stitcher Ads. Thanks everybody for joining. Hopefully you found this as exciting and informative as I did. I know this recording will be made available, and please do reach out with any questions or thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. All right. Thank you all and have a great day.